What's going on, guys? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. Today we're breaking down the brand new technique of Ben Shelton's forehand for 2024. His team has made multiple big changes to his forehand technique, and I want to look at how those things are different from 2023 and how they can benefit his forehand. If you want to find out what those changes are, stay tuned. Coming up next. All right, so we know Ben Shelton's made a pretty big jump up on the ATP Tour here in 2023, right? And going into 2024, his team has obvious goals to improve his results. So let's take a look at his forehand technique here real quick. We got 2023 on the left from Slow Mo Tennis's YouTube channel. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe over there and support them for the great content. And on the right, we've got the 2024 version. This is just taken in the last couple days. He'll be using this in the season ahead. So let's let this play once in real time and see if you can see the differences between the two. There we go. And just one more time here real quick in real time, guys. And pretty tough to see those differences in real time. So let's break it down here real quick. Again, 2023 on the left, and then 2024 version over here on the right. Let's jump in. We won't waste any time at all. We got the split step on both sides. We know we need a really good wide base to hit a good forehand. So you can see here on the left, right, super wide. That's something as a junior player, somebody developing or coaching people, you want to make sure really good width, well past the shoulders when we're splitting. So we have explosive movement to the ball and get those hips down. You can see that over here on the right. Basically the exact same situation, right? Nice wide feet, great base, hips are down. Let's start jumping into some of the changes. Right now, things look pretty similar for the most part here on the left and also on the right, right? But as we move forward, we're going to see some of the big differences in that forehand technique, and his team has obviously gone to work. So it still looks pretty similar at this stage. The one thing that kind of stands out here, and granted, he is no shirt right here on the left, right? And then on the right, he has a shirt on, but it's the space between his right elbow, the hitting elbow, and the body. Even with the t-shirt on, it looks like he has less space between the hitting elbow and his body at this stage of the swing. And over here on the left, we know that hitting elbow is more away from his body. So there's less space. That's a pretty significant change. And I did a video on his forehand earlier this year, just a few months ago, breaking down the technique, and I didn't like his elbow position a little bit on his forehand and commented on that. So let's just move a little bit further along in this technique analysis, right? So we come from here, and we can see some pretty big changes when we start looking for those differences. First one, right? The hitting elbow now has gone from a little bit away from the body to up around the height of his left shoulder. So it's really elevated and it's really high. His racket head is also now tilting and pointing forward at this stage of the swing. On the right side, the hitting elbow, we can't exactly see the position, but his hitting hand is much lower down by his chest. And that means the hitting elbow is also lower because the racket head's not tilting forward anymore, right? So he has adopted a little bit more of a Federer-style forehand in the preparation here. He's got his hitting hand lower. He's using closer to a half loop than a full loop. And we talked about that 5 or 6 years ago, how Roger Federer changed his forehand and adopted more of a half loop on his forehand. Well, Ben has done and copied the same thing. Because again, on the left side here, his hitting hand right now is up by his shoulder. And on the right, it's down by his chest. So they've taken the height of the swing and they've shortened it significantly compared to the past. That's a really big technique difference. Again, look at the height here, right, where that hand is versus the height over here on the right. It's a pretty significant difference. And as a result of not raising that elbow up in the back, right, the racket's no longer tilting forward like this on the left. On the right here, it's a little bit more vertical. And if we had some footage from the side, we get a better angle of the amount of tilt on the right versus the left. But my guess is on the right, there would maybe be a little bit of tilt yet if we could see that from the side, but nowhere near what we're seeing with that racket head essentially pointing straight forward here on the left side of the screen. So let's just move forward from this position, guys. And we can see, wow, look at how much more the racket head here on the left continues to point forward compared to over here on the right. And now we can also see that hitting elbow and the height of that hitting elbow on the left being equivalent, to the height of the shoulder roughly compared to over here on the right. Look at the difference in the height of that hitting elbow. It's significant and it takes a lot longer to get through the swing. You might say, Jason, why are they making all these changes? And we'll get into that in a second. Pros tend to make their big changes in the off season between about the middle of November and the end of December. So they'll go in, have their strokes filmed, analyze things if need be, with governing bodies or their teams, and then they'll decide if they want to make changes. I used to do that all the time in my job at the USTA. So that was a major component. It's either results driven, like you're not getting as good of a stroke as you want, or it's based on injury. And my guess is for Ben, it is a results driven process that drove this change on the forehand side. Also, that video on YouTube a few months ago probably didn't hurt. They probably watched that and saw what they needed to correct on the forehand side. So from here like this, we can see, right? Look at the difference in that tilt. And then also from here, look at his racket as it comes down. He has a little bit more of the Yannick Sinner style forehand on the left with the racket strings pointed back towards the back curtain or back wall, right? We can see that. Look at over here on the right, massive difference in where the racket strings are pointed. They're now pointed much more to the ground than they are to the back. Now, the move to the left pointed more to the back. That's going to be a bigger move as your racket comes forward to the ball and twists, right? Which would generate hypothetically more racket head speed, but there's also more racket movement involved to make that happen, which makes timing and taking balls early more difficult. Over here on the right, it's already pointed a little bit more towards the ground. So the move forward and how much it has to move forward later on in the swing here in a minute won't be as much, it won't be as significant. It'll be easier for him to perform the actual move. So just from here, guys, we're going to go forward again from this area, but look at that massive difference in that backswing. And then just from here, now we get into a swing that looks a little bit more similar in both frames, right? So on the left, the swing looks pretty similar to what we see over here on the right at this stage. So things have finally matched up, which is a good sign. But then from here, we notice another significant difference, and that is the amount of the actual flip of the racket. So when we get a flip on the racket head, we want to make sure we're on the right side at first, right? And he's doing that on both videos, the right side of our body. And then from that position, as we go forward, we want it to relax the arm and we want it to flip. And we want the ideal flip amount, which is tip of the racket head gets behind the hitting elbow on most balls. That's what we're looking for. That's a tour level forehand, top level forehand. Over on the left, he has even a larger amount of tip of the racket head going behind the hitting elbow than he does over on the right side, right? So look at how much more that's behind the elbow versus over here on the right, which is a much smaller distance. You might say, Jason, well, that distance is smaller, so the swing itself won't be as powerful, right? Because it's not as long. There's definitely some possibility that he's going to lose a tiny bit of power on that forehand side, but we'll get into in a second why I think he's made all these changes for 2024 with his team. And from here, guys, we're just going to go from that position. And we do have two different heights of balls. That could be affecting the amount of tip flip here on the left versus over here on the right on a lower ball. We may go a little bit further back and then get a little more spin because of the different contact heights. That contact height, though, will not affect all these major differences that are happening in the swing. And now we'll get into why I think this change happened. Number one, that video going up on YouTube probably didn't hurt. His team probably watched that and probably say, hey, we played Djokovic in the US Open and we got throttled. And that's no offense to Ben or, his result, but they took a beat down in that match, and Djokovic hits so deep with his ground strokes and makes a conscious effort to hit very deep on his forehand and backhand side. And when that happens, you don't have time for an excessively large swing, and that's what Ben has on the forehand side, or what he had. Look at this excessively large swing. There's a lot going on here. The elbow being raised to that height of the shoulder is just going to cause you to take more time to get through the swing. It's not necessary. You don't want to raise your elbow up like this when you hit a forehand. It's not a necessary component to an efficient and powerful forehand. It's just excess that we don't need. And his team has kind of copied Federer a little bit. More of a half loop, right? Not bringing that elbow up, not making it excessive, and then coming through. So I think what really forced this change is probably that result against Djokovic. Again, the insane depth that Novak hits with, you don't have time to have an excessively large swing and try to get through that swing. You don't have the time to work through that. There's a chance your ball will not be as good of a ball if you have all these extra components within your swing. And because it's not as efficient and it's too large, the depth will bother you more and your quality of ball coming back over to Novak will be less. So he'll end up really punishing you if you have flaws in your technique. And Novak is very aware of this. He studies opponents. He knows what swing should look like. He's perfected his swings basically at this point. And he knows if I'm playing somebody like Ben, right, with a large backswing with excessive motion in it, I'll focus on depth, get him to hit a lot of weak balls or shank a lot of balls, and I'll get a lot of free points just because his mechanics on his forehand are flawed. So yeah, kudos to Ben Shelton's team for changing his forehand technique and trying to make it more efficient for 2024. He might lose a little bit of power on the swing. That's possible because it's a little bit shorter, but he's going to gain a lot of benefits in being able to take balls a little bit earlier, have a cleaner swing that's more efficient, and I believe this swing will stand up better overall against depth from players like Djokovic. I guess we'll find out as the season continues. If you found this analysis helpful or you have any comments or questions, make sure you drop them in the comments section below. Give this video a thumbs up. I'm Jason Frausto for tennisunleashed.net. I'll see you next time.